Hi, my name is Harold Pattison, and I'm 77 years old. 3 years ago, my own son looked me in the eye and called me a useless old man. I was 72, living in the house I built with my own hands, and yes, maybe I was slowing down. Maybe I forgot things sometimes. Maybe my hands shook when I held my coffee cup. My son decided I was a burden, a liability, taking up space in a world that no longer had room for me. But he was wrong. Drop a comment telling me what country you're watching from. And if you believe that getting older doesn't mean becoming worthless, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because what I did the next day changed not just my life, but the lives of thousands of seniors across America. Sometimes the worst insult becomes the greatest motivation. My name is Harold Pattison, and I'm 72 years old. For most of my life, I thought I was a successful man. I built a construction company from nothing, raised 3 children after my wife died young, and worked every day until I was 68 to provide for my family. But on March 15, 2024, my own son made me question everything I thought I knew about my worth as a human being. "You're nothing but a useless old man, Dad." Those words came from Michael, my eldest son, as I stood in what used to be my own kitchen, holding a cup of coffee with shaking hands. The tremor had started 6 months earlier. Not Parkinson's, the doctors assured me, just age and stress. But to Michael, it was apparently another sign of my declining usefulness. "I can't do this anymore," Michael continued, pacing around the kitchen island of the house I had built with my own hands 40 years ago. "You can't live alone, you can't drive safely, you can't even make coffee without spilling it everywhere." I looked down at the small puddle of coffee on the counter, evidence of my shaking hands that morning. "Michael, I'm sorry about the mess. I'll clean it up." "It's not about the coffee, Dad. It's about everything. Yesterday you forgot to turn off the stove. Last week you couldn't remember where you put your medication. You're becoming a liability." A liability. The word hit me like a physical blow. In my 72 years on this earth, I have been called many things. Tough, hard-working, stubborn, occasionally an ass when I was being particularly difficult. But never a liability. "Michael, I know I'm getting older, but I can still take care of myself. Maybe I just need a little help with some things." "A little help?" Michael laughed bitterly. "Dad, you need constant supervision. And I can't provide that. Sarah and I both work full-time, the kids have activities, we have our own lives." Sarah was Michael's wife, a woman who had barely spoken to me since their wedding 12 years ago. She tolerated my presence at family gatherings, but made it clear that I was an inconvenience in their perfect suburban life. "What are you saying, son?" "I'm saying it's time for you to face reality. You need to go to a care facility." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was consuming everything I held dear. "A care facility? Michael, this is my home. I built this house. Your mother and I raised you children here. She's buried in the cemetery just 2 miles away." "Dad, stop being so dramatic. It's just a building." "Just a building?" I felt anger rising in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. "This house holds 40 years of memories. Every board, every nail, every room has a story. Stories don't matter when you're a danger to yourself and others." "I'm not a danger to anyone." "Really? What about when you drove to the grocery store last month and couldn't remember how to get home? Mrs. Henderson from next door had to come get you because you were sitting in the parking lot, confused and scared." I remembered that day. It had been terrifying, sitting in my car, looking at familiar streets that suddenly seemed foreign. But it had only happened once. That was just one time. One time too many. "Dad, face the facts. You're old, you're confused, and you're useless. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone." There it was again. Useless. I had raised this man from a baby. I had walked the floor with him when he had colic, taught him to ride a bike, paid for his college education, helped him start his own business, walked him down the aisle at his wedding because he asked me to, despite tradition. And now he was calling me useless. "Michael, I understand you're concerned about me, but calling me useless." "I'm calling it like I see it, Dad. What do you contribute to this family anymore? What purpose do you serve? You can't work, you can barely take care of yourself, you're just taking up space. Taking up space. In the house I built. In the life I created. I'm still your father. Being my father doesn't give you the right to be a burden on this family indefinitely. A burden. A liability. Useless. Taking up space. Each word was a dagger to my heart. Michael, when you were young and you were scared at night, who did you come to? Dad, don't. When you broke your arm playing baseball, who sat with you in the emergency room for 8 hours? That's not relevant. When you couldn't afford the down payment for your first house, who gave you the money? Dad, stop it. Those things were a long time ago. When your mother was dying, who held your hand while you cried? Enough. Michael slammed his hand on the counter. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're living in the past. You think that because you did those things years ago, you're entitled to disrupt our lives now. I'm not trying to disrupt anyone's life. I just want to stay in my own home. Your home is falling apart, just like you are. The roof leaks, the plumbing is old, the electrical system is from the 1980s. It would cost more to fix this place than it's worth. Then I'll fix it myself. With what? Dad, you can barely hold a coffee cup steady. You think you can climb on a roof. He was right, and we both knew it. The house did need work, and my hands weren't steady enough anymore for the kind of repairs it required. I could hire someone. With what money? Dad, your savings are almost gone. The medical bills from your surgery last year wiped out most of what you had left. I hadn't known he was aware of my financial situation. I had tried to keep that information private, not wanting to burden my children with worry about money. I have my Social Security, which barely covers your basic expenses. Dad, be realistic. You can't afford to maintain this house, and you can't physically maintain it. It's time to let it go. And go where? Sunny Acres is a nice facility. They have activities, medical staff on site, people your own age to socialize with. You mean an old folks' home? I mean a place where you'll be safe and cared for. And out of your way. Michael's jaw tightened. Yes, Dad. If you want to put it that way, yes. Out of our way. We have our own lives to live, and we can't revolve everything around taking care of you. I never asked you to revolve anything around me. You don't have to ask. Just by being here, being the way you are now, you're asking. Every time I have to check on you, every time Sarah has to worry about whether you've fallen or gotten confused, every time we have to explain to the kids why Grandpa can't remember their names sometimes, it's all asking. I forgot Tommy's name one time. It was twice. And last week you called Jennifer Susan. Susan was your sister. She died when she was 3. Sometimes the memories get mixed up. Exactly my point. Dad, you're not the man you used to be. The sooner you accept that, the easier this transition will be. I looked around the kitchen where my wife used to make Sunday dinners for the whole family, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where she had told me she was pregnant with each of our children, where I had held her the night before she went into the hospital for the last time. What about your brother and sister? Have you talked to them about this? Jennifer agrees with me. David, well, David thinks we should give you more time, but he lives across the country. It's easy for him to have opinions when he doesn't have to deal with the day-to-day reality. So you've all been discussing this behind my back. We've been discussing what's best for you. Without me. Because you're not capable of making rational decisions about your own welfare anymore. Says who? Says the fact that you forgot to turn off the stove and nearly burned the house down. I caught it in time. Nothing happened. Something could have happened. What if you had gone to bed with the stove on? What if you had fallen asleep? But I didn't. Dad, you're missing the point. The fact that it was even a possibility. The fact that it was a possibility is life, Michael. Life is full of possibilities. Should I stop living because something might happen? You should stop pretending that you're still capable of independent living when all the evidence suggests otherwise. I set down my coffee cup, noting that my hands were trembling more than usual. Whether from age, stress, or emotion, I couldn't tell. Michael, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. What? If the situations were reversed, if you were old and needed help, would you want me to call you useless and ship you off to die in a nursing home? Dad, you're being dramatic again. Sunny Acres isn't a place where people go to die. It's a place where people go when their families decide they're no longer worth the effort. That's not fair, isn't it? Michael, tell me honestly, when was the last time you visited me because you wanted to, not because you felt obligated? Michael was quiet for a long moment. When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you included me in family plans without Sarah suggesting it might be too much for me? Dad. When was the last time you looked at me and saw your father instead of a problem to be solved? Michael's silence was answer enough. You want to know what's really useless, son? It's not an old man who forgets things sometimes or spills coffee. It's a family that throws away decades of love and sacrifice because taking care of each other has become inconvenient. Dad, that's not what we're doing, isn't it? You've made your decision, Michael. You've decided I'm useless, that I'm a burden, that I'm taking up space in a world that no longer has room for me. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder? For who? For you. Because God forbid you should have to be inconvenienced by the man who gave you life and spent his own life making sure you had everything you needed. That's what parents are supposed to do. And what are children supposed to do when their parents get old? Michael didn't answer. I'll tell you what they're supposed to do, son. They're supposed to remember that love isn't just for when it's easy. They're supposed to understand that the man who wiped their tears and taught them right from wrong deserves better than to be called useless and discarded. I walked slowly toward the kitchen door, feeling every one of my 72 years in my aching joints. Where are you going? To think. About what you've said. About what I'm going to do next. Dad, the appointment at Sunny Acres is tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll pick you up at 1:30. I stopped at the doorway and turned back to look at my son. For a moment, I saw him as he had been as a child, eager, loving, looking up to me like I hung the moon. Then reality crashed back, and I saw him as he was now, a middle-aged man who had decided his father was disposable. Michael. Yes. You're right about one thing. I'm not the man I used to be. But neither are you. That night, I sat in my living room, surrounded by 72 years of life. Photo albums filled with memories of a family that no longer seemed to exist. Books I had read and reread. Tools I could no longer use. Furniture I had built when my hands were steady and my back was strong. I thought about the words Michael had used: useless, liability, burden, taking up space. And then I thought about something my father had told me when I was a young man, struggling with whether I was good enough, smart enough, strong enough to build the life I wanted. Son, he had said, a man's worth isn't measured by what others think of him. It's measured by what he chooses to do when everything seems lost. For the first time in months, I smiled. Because tomorrow, I was going to show my family exactly what this useless old man was still capable of. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. My hands were steadier, my mind sharper, and my purpose crystal clear. Michael expected me to be ready for Sunny Acres at 1:30 p.m. Instead, I was going to show him what Harold Patterson could still accomplish when he set his mind to it. By 6 a.m., I was dressed and in my garage, looking at tools I hadn't touched in over a year. My workshop, once the pride of my property, had become a storage area for Christmas decorations and old boxes. But underneath the dust and neglect, everything was still there. The table saw my father had given me, the hand tools I had collected over 40 years, the workbench where I had taught my children to build birdhouses and fix broken toys. My first project was simple but symbolic. The kitchen cabinet door that had been hanging crooked for 6 months, the one Michael always pointed to as evidence of my declining capabilities. You can't even fix a simple cabinet door, Dad. I measured carefully, marked the placement, and adjusted the hinges. It took me longer than it would have 10 years ago, and I had to stop twice to rest my hands, but within an hour, the door was perfectly aligned. Next, I tackled the leaky faucet in the bathroom. Another item on Michael's list of my failures. I had to make 2 trips to the hardware store, and the young clerk looked skeptical when I described what I needed, but by noon, the faucet was running perfectly. I was tightening the last connection when I heard Michael's car in the driveway. 1:25 p.m. He was early. "Dad," he called from the front door. "Are you ready? We need to leave for your appointment." I walked slowly from the bathroom to the living room, where Michael was standing with his wife Sarah and their 2 children, Tommy and Jennifer. They all had that look people get when they're about to do something unpleasant but necessary, like taking a pet to be put down. "I'm not going," I said simply. Michael's face went through several expressions: confusion, irritation, and finally anger. "Dad, we talked about this yesterday. You're going to tour Sunny Acres. It's a done deal." I said I'm not going. "Dad, you don't have a choice in this matter." "Actually, son, I do. I'm a competent adult, and no one can force me to leave my home." Sarah stepped forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her purse. "Harold, we're trying to do what's best for you." "Are you? Or are you trying to do what's most convenient for you?" "That's not fair," Michael said. "Dad, you can't live alone anymore. Yesterday you proved that when you admitted you couldn't take care of basic maintenance." "About that," I said, walking toward the kitchen, "would you mind taking a look at something?" Reluctantly, Michael followed me. I opened and closed the cabinet door that had been crooked for months. "How did you?" Michael started. "I fixed it. This morning. Along with the bathroom faucet that's been dripping for 3 months." Michael opened the cabinet door again, testing the smooth motion. "Dad, you shouldn't be using tools. What if you had hurt yourself? What if I had?" "Michael, everything in life carries risk. The question is whether the risk is worth taking. These are minor repairs. That doesn't prove you can live independently." "No, you're right. It doesn't prove that. But it proves I'm not as useless as you think I am." I led him out to the garage, where I had spent the morning organizing my workshop. Tools were cleaned and arranged, the workbench was clear, and in the center sat something that made Michael's eyes widen. It was a wooden jewelry box, beautifully crafted with dovetail joints and a hand-rubbed finish. On the top, I had carved "Jennifer" in elegant script letters. "I made this for your daughter," I said. "Her 10th birthday is next week. I know because I marked it on my calendar, despite what you think about my memory." Jennifer, who had been hanging back shyly, stepped forward to examine the box. "Grandpa, did you really make this for me?" "I did, sweetheart." "Open it." She lifted the lid, and a small melody began to play, "For Elise," the piece she had been practicing on piano. Inside the box, lined with red velvet, was a small note, "For my granddaughter Jennifer, who brightens every room she enters. Love, Grandpa." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "Grandpa, it's beautiful. How did you know 'For Elise' is my favorite?" "Because I listen when you play, sweetheart. Even when my old ears don't work as well as they used to." Michael was staring at the jewelry box in shock. "Dad, when did you make this?" "I've been working on it for 3 weeks, in the evenings when I couldn't sleep. The same evenings you thought I was just sitting in my chair, being useless." Sarah cleared her throat. "Harold, it's lovely, but making a jewelry box doesn't address the safety concerns." "You're right," I interrupted. "It doesn't. But this might." I led them back into the house, to my home office, a small room that had been my wife's sewing room before she died. On the desk was a thick folder full of papers. "What's this?" Michael asked. "Research. Information about aging in place. Home modification companies. Medical alert systems. Grocery delivery services. Transportation services for seniors. Physical therapy programs. Everything I would need to continue living safely in my own home." Michael flipped through the pages, his expression changing from skepticism to surprise. "Dad, this is very thorough. I may be old, son, but I'm not stupid. You think I haven't been aware of my limitations? You think I haven't been worried about the same things you're worried about? Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because every time I tried to talk to you about getting older, you acted like it was a crisis that required immediate, drastic action. You never gave me a chance to show you that I could adapt." I opened the folder to a page covered with my handwriting. This is a budget. It shows exactly how much it would cost to implement all these safety measures and services. It's less than half of what you'd pay for a year at Sunny Acres. Dad, this is... Michael studied the numbers. This is actually realistic. Of course it's realistic. I didn't build a successful business for 30 years without learning how to create realistic budgets. Tommy, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Grandpa, does this mean you're not going away? That depends on your father, Tommy. Michael was still looking through the folder. Dad, you've obviously put a lot of thought into this. More thought than you put into your decision to ship me off to a nursing home. It's not a nursing home. Michael, call it whatever you want. The result is the same. You wanted me out of your lives because you decided I was too much trouble. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Harold, that's not true. Isn't it, Sarah? When was the last time you invited me to dinner? When was the last time you suggested the children spend time with me? When was the last time you treated me like a member of this family instead of a problem to be managed? Sarah didn't answer. You know what the real tragedy is? I continued. I'm not going to live forever. Whether I'm here in my own home or warehoused in Sunny Acres, you probably have 10 years with me, maybe 15 if I'm lucky. And you're willing to throw away that time because taking care of me requires effort. Dad, it's not about effort. Yes, it is, Michael. It's about effort and inconvenience and the fact that caring for an aging parent doesn't fit into your perfectly planned suburban lifestyle. That's not fair. Fair? Let me tell you what's not fair. What's not fair is spending your whole life building something, a family, a home, a legacy, only to have it all dismissed as worthless the moment you need help instead of being able to provide it. I sat down heavily in my favorite chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 72 years. But you know what? I don't want to be where I'm not wanted. If you really think I'm that much of a burden, then maybe Sunny Acres is where I belong. Dad, don't say that. Why not? It's what you've been telling me. Jennifer suddenly ran over and threw her arms around my neck. Grandpa, I don't want you to go anywhere. I want you to stay here and teach me how to make jewelry boxes. And I want to help you practice piano, sweetheart. Tommy joined his sister. Grandpa, you're not useless. You're the one who taught me how to tie my shoes and ride my bike. Looking at my grandchildren, I realized that while my son might have forgotten who I was, they still saw me as Grandpa, the man who told them stories and fixed their toys and made them feel special. Michael, I said quietly, I've shown you that I'm not as helpless as you think. I've shown you that I've been planning for my future instead of just ignoring it. What I can't show you is how to value the time we have left together. Dad, Let me finish. You called me useless yesterday. But the only thing that's truly useless is throwing away family because it requires effort. The only thing that's truly worthless is deciding that love has an expiration date. Michael was quiet for a long moment, looking at the research I had compiled, the repairs I had completed, the gift I had made for his daughter. Dad, I owe you an apology. You owe me more than that, son. You owe me the respect of being included in decisions about my own life. You owe me the courtesy of asking what I want instead of telling me what you've decided. And you owe me the chance to prove that I can still contribute to this family. What do you want to do? I want to implement this plan. I want to age in place, in my own home, with dignity and independence for as long as possible. And when the time comes that I truly can't take care of myself, I want to be part of the decision about what happens next. And if we agree to this plan, if we help you implement these changes, will you promise to be honest about when you need more help? I promise to be honest if you promise to listen without immediately jumping to the conclusion that I need to be institutionalized. Dad, I'm sorry I called you useless. I was frustrated and scared, and I took it out on you. Scared of what? Scared of watching you decline. Scared of making the wrong decisions. Scared of losing you. Michael, you're not going to lose me to old age. But you will lose me if you keep treating me like I'm already gone. Sarah, who had been quiet throughout this exchange, finally spoke up. Harold, I owe you an apology too. I've been pushing Michael to make this decision because I was worried about him worrying about you. But I never stopped to think about what you wanted. What I want, Sarah, is to be a grandfather to those children. I want to teach Jennifer woodworking and help Tommy with his science projects. I want to be part of Sunday dinners and birthday parties and Christmas mornings. I want to contribute to this family instead of being a burden on it. You're not a burden, Grandpa, Jennifer said firmly. Your family. Out of the mouths of babes. That afternoon, instead of touring Sunny Acres, we called the companies I had researched. By the end of the week, I had a medical alert system, a twice-weekly housekeeper, grocery delivery service, and a physical therapist coming to help me with balance and strength exercises. More importantly, I had my family back. But the biggest change wasn't in the services or the safety measures. The biggest change was in how my family saw me, not as a problem to be solved, but as a person worthy of respect and inclusion. And I had learned something too, that sometimes being called useless is exactly the motivation you need to prove just how useful you still are. 6 months after that terrible day when Michael called me useless, my life had transformed in ways I never expected. The house modifications were in place, the support services were working perfectly, and more importantly, my relationship with my family had been completely rebuilt. But the most significant change wasn't in my circumstances. It was in my purpose. It started with a phone call from my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, the same woman who had helped me that day I got confused at the grocery store. "Harold," she said, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you manage to stay in your home? My son is pressuring me to sell my house and move to assisted living, and I just don't want to go." I spent an hour on the phone with her, sharing the research I had done and the services I had found. By the end of our conversation, she was crying with relief. "I thought I didn't have any choices," she said. "I thought it was nursing home or nothing." There are always choices, Eleanor. Sometimes we just need help finding them. The next week, Eleanor called again. "Harold, I have a friend whose daughter is trying to put her in memory care, but she's only in the early stages of dementia. Could you talk to her?" And so it began. Word spread through the senior community about the man who had successfully advocated for his right to age in place. Soon I was getting calls from elderly people all over the city, asking for advice, support, and sometimes just someone to listen to their fears about losing their independence. "Dad," Michael said one evening as we worked together on building a new deck railing, a project I had designed and was perfectly capable of supervising, "you realize you've become some kind of unofficial advocate for seniors, right?" "I've just been helping people find information," I said, holding a board steady while he secured it with screws. "It's more than that." Mrs. Peterson from down the street told Sarah that you helped her negotiate with her insurance company to get coverage for home modifications. "And didn't you help the Johnsons set up that meal delivery service?" People just need someone to show them what's possible. "Dad, have you ever thought about making this official?" "What do you mean?" "I mean creating a real program. A consulting service for seniors who want to age in place." I stopped what I was doing and looked at my son. "You think there would be interest in something like that?" "Dad, in the past 6 months, you've helped at least 20 families avoid nursing home placements. You've saved those families thousands of dollars and given those seniors their dignity back. Of course there would be interest." That conversation planted a seed that grew into something I never could have imagined. With Michael's help and his business expertise, I founded Golden Years Independence Consulting. Our mission was simple: help seniors and their families explore all options for aging in place before resorting to institutional care. The business started small, operating out of my home office. But within a year, we were getting referrals from doctors, social workers, and area hospitals. We had helped over 200 seniors remain in their homes safely, and the demand was growing every month. "Mr. Patterson," said Dr. Maria Santos, a geriatrician who had become one of our regular referral sources, "what you've created is revolutionary. You're not just helping people stay in their homes, you're changing the conversation about aging in America." "I'm just showing people that getting older doesn't mean becoming useless," I replied. Dr. Santos smiled. "You know, that's exactly the attitude that makes this work. You approach aging as a challenge to be met, not a defeat to be accepted." The success of the consulting business led to something even more unexpected. I was invited to speak at conferences about aging and senior care. My first speaking engagement was terrifying. Standing in front of 300 geriatric care professionals, I felt like a fraud. What did I know about aging policy or healthcare systems? I was just an old carpenter who had refused to be put out to pasture. But when I started talking about my experience, about being called useless, about the research I had done, about the choices available to seniors, the audience was completely engaged. The biggest barrier to aging in place isn't physical, I told them. It's not even financial. The biggest barrier is the assumption that getting older means becoming incompetent. When families and even healthcare providers start with the assumption that independence is impossible, they stop looking for ways to make it possible. After my talk, I was surrounded by people wanting to know more about our approach. 3 different cities asked me to help them develop similar programs. "Dad," Jennifer said after attending one of my conferences, she was now 12 and had become my unofficial assistant, helping me organize files and answer phones after school, "I'm proud of you." "Why's that, sweetheart?" "Because you turned something bad into something good. When Daddy called you useless, you could have gotten mad or sad. But instead, you decided to help other people." "Well, I did get mad and sad first," I admitted. "But then you got useful," she said with a grin. 2 years after starting the consulting business, I received an unexpected phone call from the Administration on Aging, a federal agency focused on senior services. "Mr. Patterson, we've been following your work in aging-in-place consulting. We'd like to discuss the possibility of expanding your model nationally." 6 months later, I found myself in Washington, D.C., presenting to a congressional subcommittee on aging about the benefits and cost-effectiveness of supporting seniors who want to remain in their homes. "Honorable members," I said, looking out at the distinguished panel, "3 years ago, my son called me a useless old man. Today, the program that grew out of that experience has helped over 1,000 seniors avoid premature nursing home placement, saving families and taxpayers millions of dollars while preserving the dignity and independence of our nation's elders." The room was completely silent. The question before you today is not whether seniors can age successfully in their own homes. We've proven they can. The question is whether we as a society will support their right to do so. The legislation that resulted from that hearing, the Aging in Place Support Act, provided federal funding for programs like ours in all 50 states. At the bill signing ceremony, I found myself standing next to the President of the United States as he signed legislation that would impact millions of seniors across the country.
"Mr. Patterson, the President said as photographers capture the moment, this legislation exists because you refuse to accept that getting older means becoming useless. You've given seniors across America hope that they can age with dignity in their own homes. Mr. President, I just proved that when someone calls you useless, you have 2 choices. You can believe them or you can prove them wrong." On the flight home from Washington, I reflected on the incredible journey that had started with my son's hurtful words. Michael met me at the airport, along with Sarah and the kids. Now 14, Jennifer ran up and hugged me. "Grandpa, we saw you on TV with the President. You're famous." "No, sweetheart, I'm just useful." That evening, as we sat around the dinner table in my house, the same house Michael had once said was falling apart and should be sold, my son raised his glass. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, "to my father, who taught me that being useful isn't about what you can do for others. It's about what you choose to do when others have given up on you. And," he continued, his voice becoming emotional, "I want to apologize again for calling you useless. It was the stupidest thing I've ever said, and I'm grateful every day that you proved me wrong. Michael, that word, useless, was the best gift you ever gave me." "How can you say that?" "Because it forced me to prove, to myself and to everyone else, that age doesn't determine worth. That getting older doesn't mean becoming irrelevant. That sometimes the most important work of your life begins when other people think your useful life is over." 5 years after that terrible conversation in my kitchen, I published a book, The Useless Old Man, How One Insult Changed Everything. It became a bestseller among seniors and their families, and the royalties funded scholarships for students studying gerontology and elder care. The inscription I wrote in the first copy, which I gave to Michael, read, "To my son, who taught me that sometimes the worst thing someone can say to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you." Today, at 77, I run a national consulting firm. speak regularly at conferences, and serve on the boards of 3 organizations focused on senior advocacy. My hands still shake sometimes. I still forget things occasionally, and I definitely move slower than I used to. But I am not useless. Every senior who calls our hotline, every family we help navigate the challenges of aging, every policy we influence that supports aging in place, they're all proof that worth isn't measured by youth or physical ability. They're proof that sometimes the most valuable thing you can be called is useless, because it forces you to prove just how useful you really are. And Michael? He's now the COO of Golden Years Independence Consulting, working alongside the useless old man he once wanted put in a nursing home. Some of our colleagues don't understand how a father and son can work together after such a painful beginning to their story. But we understand something they don't. Sometimes the deepest wounds can become the strongest foundations, if you're willing to build something new on top of them. Dad, Michael said to me just last week as we reviewed applications for our new mentorship program, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't called you useless that day? Every day, I admitted, I think I would have gone quietly to Sunny Acres, spent my remaining years playing bingo and watching television, and died knowing that my last contribution to the world was being a burden on my children. Instead, you've changed the lives of thousands of people. We've changed thousands of lives, son. This program wouldn't exist without your business skills, your connections, your willingness to admit you were wrong and work to make it right. But it started with you refusing to be defeated. No, I corrected him. It started with you giving me something to fight for. When you called me useless, you challenged me to prove my worth. Most people my age would have accepted that judgment. But I decided to show you and myself that worth isn't determined by age or ability. What's our next goal? I smiled and pointed to a stack of letters on my desk. Requests from seniors in other countries who had heard about our program and want to help starting similar initiatives in their communities. I think it's time to show the world that the problem of elderly people being dismissed as useless isn't just an American problem, and neither is the solution. At 77 years old, I wake up every morning with purpose, passion, and the absolute certainty that my most important work is still ahead of me. And it all started the day my own son called me useless. Sometimes the worst insult becomes the greatest motivation. Sometimes being called worthless is exactly what you need to discover your true worth. And sometimes being labeled as useless is the first step toward becoming more useful than you ever imagined possible.